Cafe racers are starting to ruin motorcycles. Put down the saw, stop chopping up into your bikes, and listen closely. The cafe racer trend really popped up a few years ago, chopping into primarily old Japanese bikes, converting them into the British racer style of the 50s and 60s. During that time period, riders of British bikes will put lower clip-on handlebars and take off all of the excessive weight off their bikes and ride from one cafe to another, getting the name cafe racer. But that has nothing to do with the things that I want to talk about in this video, so let's actually get into it. Primarily, this started back in 2008 when the Cafe Racer TV show came out. This influenced hundreds and thousands of people into going and ruining practically good bikes to make them less practical, never finishing their bikes, or just making them into straight up parts. At this point, I've seen one too many poorly designed or poorly chopped up Cafe Racer project, and I need to say something. But with that being said, I enjoy Cafe Racers, I like the trend, I like a lot of builds that have come out, and there are a ton of fantastic projects, but I feel like for every one good project, there are 5 failures out there, and that's 5 less bikes of a certain model that are now out there because someone chopped the frame in half. I actually have a few bikes I'm waiting to turn into Cafe Racers, and one bike that's currently in the middle of a project that is on the back burner for just a tad. And that's the unfortunate truth with a lot of bikes, that they begin to be converted into something and then never get finished. So here's my problems with Cafe Racers and the things that you need to consider before making a Cafe Racer and maybe not making one at all. I suppose this would also go for buying that poorly modified Cafe Racer off of Facebook Marketplace because, well, I've bought some of those as well. Now, most people that are sitting at home, they watch the TV show, they're watching YouTube, they're watching all of these beautiful builds come out, and they get the idea to build their own bike. Well, they do not know what they're doing when it comes to modifying motorcycles, and the project never ends up finished, or it ends up into this motorcycle that has basically no thought put into it, very poorly designed, very tacky, and it's just ultimately worse than what the bike would have been stock. And now they've thrown away all of the stock components when it comes to the motorcycle, so you can't even justify reversing it back into something that actually works. There's a couple fantastic videos out there talking about like the problem with Cafe Racers, and that's a little bit different from what I'm talking about in this video. Those videos go a little bit into more of lowering the handlebars and taking the fenders off, make the bike completely impractical, and well, you're never going to really ride that type of Cafe Racer on an extended period, or you're just gonna basically look at it and it's never actually going to be rode. And those things all remain to be true, but the thing is, you can make a Cafe Racer into a proper riding machine. Not all Cafe Racers have to be just this bare bones shell of a bike. A very prominent member of the Cafe Racer TV show was Greg Hagman. If you look at his bikes, they are very elegantly designed. They're very well done. I'm someone who enjoys his work and takes influence from his works into my builds that I want to do. His bikes are very practical, very rideable. You can go take it down the road, you can go take it for a nice cruise, come back, because it's simple, it's usable, and well, when it comes to it, they still look really good. What doesn't look really good is the Facebook bike that's missing the fenders, missing the tack, missing the handlebars, missing everything that made the bike function correctly in the first place, and now it just has that Cafe Racer look. Now, there's certain bikes that are made to be Cafe Racers in my opinion. The Virago is like the perfect example. It's not that great of a street bike. They're cheap for a reason, they're a little finicky, but the rear subframe completely comes off. You slap a Cafe Racer subframe on it, there's little to no fabrication work done to those bikes to make them look fantastic. In order to make a good Cafe Racer, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. Number one is you need to know how a motorcycle functions. If you've never built a motorcycle before, much less rode a motorcycle before you chop into the bike that you bought, please ride it, see what it lacks, see what you would want out of that bike. But before we get into this next point, there's one thing I need to mention. Over 40% of you guys that are returning to my videos are not subscribed. So in order to not miss any videos, not miss any of my builds, make sure to go down, click the subscribe button because it helps the channel out greatly. There are a ton of people that got influenced by Cafe Racers to build their own who aren't riders. And the problem with that is, again, the fact that they've never actually rode a motorcycle, so they don't know know what they would want out of a bike. So put the saw down and go take the motorcycle for a ride. Before you do anything with the machine, make sure that it is mechanically sound. I think this is a huge thing when it comes to it, because if you build a bike that isn't mechanically sound in the first place, you put all this time and effort into it for it not to run properly, you're gonna regret tearing this bike that isn't working apart and then trying to put everything back together and then it's still not working. There's going to be so many variables when you tear into everything, you change a bunch of things that could go wrong and have gone wrong with the bike. You might even create more issues for yourself that you need to then go out and fix, or in some cases they are unfixable. Now before actually building it, you need to come up with a game plan, figure out how you want it to look, figure out how much money you want to spend on it, and then be ready to spend a lot of time on it and be ready to go well over budget. There's nothing wrong with doing a budget build, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to spend a ton of money on one of these bikes, but you're going to end up spending some type of money. The next point I want to make is do not cheap out on parts. Don't put your bike together with duct tape and properly mount up everything. Even though the essence of a cafe racer is to lower the handlebar, put a bump seat on it, take off all the excessive weight, there are things in 2025 that you need to have in order to actually have a motorcycle that functions. One of those things is a speedometer. I highly recommend you have a tachometer, and I also very highly recommend you have indicators that stick off the bike like DOT requires. Now, in 2024, 2025, there are so many distracted people on the road. There are so many people in their bubble cars, and if you get hit by one of them, it's not going to be a good time for you. So please put the proper indicators and lights on your bike. Even though by definition a cafe racer isn't practical, make sure you have a functioning bike at the end of the day. The next thing to consider is the ergonomics of the bike, because if you've never rode a motorcycle before, you won't understand how the proper functionality of a bike should be in the proper seating position. You need to figure out how far back you want to sit, you gotta figure out where to put the foot pegs, you gotta figure out all of those things when you're building the bike, because you're moving everything back just a little bit in order to have a little bit more of an approach. And that discourages a lot of people from the hobbies thinking, maybe this isn't for me, when a couple minor tweaks you could be much more comfortable, whether it's raising the handlebar a little bit, moving it forward a little bit, moving your seating position back a little bit, whatever it is. You know, you see a CB750 cafe racer on Facebook Marketplace, or any cafe racer on Facebook Marketplace that's, you know, a couple $1,000s, and you look at it and you say, it looks kind of good, but it's also ruined at the same time. I've seen one too many bad cafe racers out there, so before you chop into your bike, please put some time, thought, and actually think about what the bike is going to look like at the end, and stop building cheap cafe racers. You can do a budget build, there is nothing wrong with that. But there is a difference between cheap and doing it on a budget. I'm building some cafe racers. I bought a couple cafe racers to convert back to stock. I bought a CB404. If you haven't seen that video, click here, make sure to go check it out. If you disagree with some of my opinions, let me hear them in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.